Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. On today's show, we have the privilege of having on our show someone who is said to be the most pleasing diplomat around. We have the privilege of welcoming on our show Mr. Cornelius M. Kerr. Thank you very much for coming on our show.
Well, thank you. I'm probably one of the most pleasing diplomats around because, of course, in Hyderabad there are so few of us.
But you are one of the most invited, that's what we are told, sir, on the social circuit.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming on our show. We do appreciate your time. Right, so before we begin, we would like to know something about the specific record that you hold of being the very first Consul General of Hyderabad. So records are made to be broken, but this is not broken, sir.
No, it certainly can't. It certainly can't. In fact, in the past, I was involved with the last two consulates general we opened, which were in China, quite a few decades prior to the one in Hyderabad. We went for a long period of not opening up new facilities, and I think it's quite appropriate that of all the places all over the world that could have been chosen for a new consulate general, it was not just India, but Hyderabad that was chosen.
Something about your connection with the city. So, I mean, when was the first time you came in contact with the city? What was your first visit, and how has it been ever since?
Well, I served in India 30 years ago, and of course at that time, I'd heard of Hyderabad, but unfortunately I didn't have an opportunity to come down and see it then. But certainly events in Hyderabad have played some prominence in international news, and I think everybody who reads newspapers is aware of the increasing economic significance of Hyderabad in terms of IT. Providing services for financial companies and other things that go on here.
Certainly, and all of this has obviously led to the final process of having your presence over here in Hyderabad. Obviously,
that's right. When you have companies like Microsoft, Google, all the big corporations, Franklin Templeton, Deloitte, and others. Giving this particular city their seal of approval, then obviously we can't be too far behind.
And when you look at the city, upon retrospection, obviously, I mean, how, in terms of growth, would you call it, I mean, the kind of progress that's being made, leaps and bounds in terms of the growth that's being achieved? So, I mean, how do you see that?
Well, I think, at least from what I know of the developments in India over the last decade, Hyderabad is probably one of the few cities of several that have experienced rapid growth and yet are more or less managing to keep abreast in terms of concomitant infrastructure development to handle the growth. And I think that speaks very well about the vision of the leadership that Hyderabad has enjoyed over the last more than 10 years. So.
Certainly. Putting itself on the world map of IT.
Exactly, and at the same time, developing infrastructure that will that allows it to be, how should I say it? If people look at various cities, potential cities with the same talent pool as Hyderabad, Hyderabad may in fact win out because the roads, the airport, the proposed metro rail project, etc.
Right, if you could just talk us through something about the Consul's presence here and what is it aiming to do in terms of facilitating the visa process for the applicants over there? What else is required to be done? For now, it's doing obviously a great job.
Well, first of all, we opened doing primarily visa and American citizen services work, but indeed the role of a consulate general and our specific role here is much greater than that. We have our Center for Disease Control here, working very closely on programs with local and national health authorities, particularly in HIV, AIDS issues. We also have our Foreign Commercial Service here, which indeed preceded our Consulate General by almost a decade, promoting business exchange between the United States and India, specifically Andhra Pradesh and the United States. We have our Public Affairs Office, not only doing public affairs work, but doing educational outreach. And in the future, as we develop our facilities, we'll have more offices here. I suspect that in recognition of Hyderabad's position as probably the epicenter of the pharmaceutical industry in India, we'll have an FDA office, our Federal Drug Administration office here. I suspect in the future, given Andhra's lead in the development of alternative as well as atomic energy, that we may have our Department of Energy here. There's a vast potential here, and I think America certainly wants to be part of it.
Right. With the new administration in the US in place, with Obama in there promising change, and obviously the economy looking back at revival, and recovery is the stage where it is, which is what is being said. I mean, how do you see the things moving forward from this stage on?
Well, I think obviously the economy will improve. I mean, I think you can safely predict the economy by saying it'll either get worse or it will get better. I think we're at the stage now where it's gotten worse for a while. So hopefully sooner rather than later, it'll start to get better again. And of course, given the way growth spikes, we'll probably have a robust recovery. It may take some years. But again, I think economic development and commercial exchanges, etc., will reach new highs.
And when we talk of the Indo-US relations being at an all-time high, so how wary is the US of India, or say Andhra Pradesh, in this context of its rising power and being a dominant force in a global market?
Well, I think that America is mature enough not to be wary. I think that I think obviously we have a situation where there's a tectonic shift, if you will, in the world taking place. You have the rise of what they call the BRIC nations, which of course Brazil, Russia, India, and China. To some extent, you have perhaps more economic wealth moving further east in the world. These shifts occur perhaps not even once in a lifetime, but maybe once a century or so, or even longer. And it can be either a very disruptive process, or hopefully, if we've developed any wisdom from history, it can be a process which, of course, it's not going to be as smooth as anybody would like, but indeed a process that can take place, I think, to the benefit of all concerned.
Talking about something specific that's within the domain of your office, it's about the visas and stuff. When the applicants obviously go there, I mean, what's often being said is the kind of discrimination that's being faced. I don't know how true is that, but I mean, these several reports come, and being in media, we do get set of reports. So, what is the government or the administration doing to crack down on any kind of discrimination being made based on religion or caste or whatever it is, or based on surnames for that matter?
Nothing, because there is not that kind of discrimination. I think obviously, as everybody realizes, that we, along with every other country that issues visas, we do name checks, we do other checks, administrative checks, and that's something that goes on regardless of whether I'm in the United States getting a visa to come to India, or a resident of India is applying for a visa in the United States. We've you'll be happy to know, and I can't go into the details, but indeed a large number of administrative checks, which used to take a period of months to adjudicate, have now been reduced to a couple of weeks. So, we're addressing the issue. As far as discrimination goes, this is not a process of discrimination. This is a very methodical process done according to regulation and under very strict procedures. you know, I don't want any particular group here, be it Muslims, be it Christians, or be it Hindus, or even atheists or agnostics, to feel that somehow or another they're being discriminated against in terms of our visa services. And since you brought up Muslims, I'd also like to use this opportunity to wish all of the people, a very happy and holy month of Ramadan to enjoy with their family and friends.
Right, we'll quickly slip into a very short break at this point. The discussion will continue after a very short break. Right, welcome back. So returning back to the topic of visas, I mean, the normal perception in the minds of people is that after the 9/11 attacks and the fallout of that, not many people are visiting the US, although the desire is there to go and see the place. So, I mean, what would you say about that? I mean, how would you sort of woo people to come and visit the US?
Well, in fact, I think our visa demand has basically gone back to the point it was before 9/11. Obviously, the latest economic downturn is having some effect, but in general, for example, you know, there are more Indian students in the United States now than there ever were before, and almost approaching 1 lakh of students. And I suspect that that demand will continue to increase. Certainly, I think this is the ideal time. It's just like, you know, never start a business when times are good. You know, always start your business when times are bad, because if you start at bad times, you have a 70% success ratio. If you start at good times, you have a 30% success ratio. And I think the same thing is about, the same percentage holds true in education. Now's the time to go to the United States, get your graduate degree, and then come back when the economy starts back on the upswing, or stay in the United States and contribute to our workforce.
Absolutely, we can look forward to. Going back to one of the statements made by President Obama after his inauguration, after some time, in fact, something that, in fact, hasn't gone down well with the Indians is about shipping jobs back from Bangalore to Buffalo. So I know, I mean, it's about just taxing them heavy. I mean, he wasn't very harsh in saying that, you know, I want no jobs to be going to India. He didn't say that. He wasn't as vocal as this. But, I mean, jobs would be coming to India. So being an IT hub, you know, the Cyberabad, Bangalore as well. So what's your take on that one, sir?
Well, let me assure both the citizens of Buffalo and Bangalore that, you know, sorry Bangalore, but you'll get no jobs from Buffalo. And fortunately for you, Buffalo, none of your jobs will be exported to Bangalore. You know, Buffalo is not an IT hub, it's an old industrial city. And of course, those kinds of jobs won't be exported. I think the point that Obama was making, and you know, was the fact that the United States is going to look at companies that, for example, use offshore offices to escape paying taxes. It's going to look at I think that's more what he was talking about. Unfortunately, this was a statement made for a domestic United States audience, and like many things that are said politically here in India, taken way out of context. Unfortunately, some speechwriter was looking at a clever way of phrasing the issue. But I think what Obama really was talking about were American corporations who set up their corporate headquarters in the Cayman Islands in order to avoid paying taxes in the United States. So, you know, and in fact, you're exactly right. Outsourcing continues, and indeed, I've talked to a lot of companies here in Hyderabad, American companies, very large American companies here, and they're hiring this year at an increase over the pace last year. And the reason being is that as these multinational companies look for economies to cope with a downturn in the economy, then in fact outsourcing becomes one of the tactics that they use.
And also what's being said is in the context of what's happening, because of the historic gloomy economic times that we are now confronting. So it could well be one of those things.
Yeah, I think that you know, the reality is quite, you know, there's a lot of myths in the Indian press about what's happening to India's economy because of the downturn. For example, job losses. Believe me, at least with American companies here, there are job increases, not job losses. The myth that somehow or another H-1B visa applicants are facing a tougher you know, climb or whatever, also very false. There are no decreasing numbers in H-1B visas, and the fact is that the only controls that are really being in place now on H-1B visas are to protect Indian citizens who avail themselves of these applications. We're scrutinizing to make sure that indeed people who apply for H-1B visas here don't have to pay somebody in order to get the visa, that when they go to the United States, they're paid exactly the same wages as any American citizen would get paid for that job. These kinds of restrictions are being taken on H-1B visas, and the beneficiaries of these restrictions are indeed the Indian citizens who successfully get their visas.
Sorry, in terms of the role that the embassy is playing, the consulate is playing, what do you think is the way forward in terms of bringing, you know, it closer to India, in fact, Andhra Pradesh in this matter?
Well, I think one of the things that we're doing is we're bringing in, I think, a lot of speakers. You know, we've just really started on that program. We're bringing in a husband and wife, both professors at our National Defense University. They're going to be, among other places, at the University of Hyderabad, Osmania University, and let's see, National Urdu University, and some other institutions as well. I think we're, you know, because the Consulate General is now here, we're attracting more trade missions to come, as we've had Federal Express mission, small, medium enterprise already here. We had a delegation led by our Secretary of Transportation. We're looking forward to a delegation from Washington State, specifically to look at aviation, high tech, etc. We have renewable energy people coming. We have an aviation industry delegation coming. So now that we're here, we've kind of helped put Hyderabad on the map in terms of delegations and others from the states. We're going to have more and more high-level U.S. government visitors here. We've had some, you know, staff people from our Congress here. We're looking forward to, I think, a lot of congressional attention here. We've got a new ambassador in Delhi who, in fact, has roots in the Congress and who's going to work very hard to get his former colleagues here to come to India. So these are the kinds of things that we're very involved in.
Right, we'll quickly slip into a very short break at this point. The discussion will continue after a very short break. Right, welcome back. Going back to the relationship of India and America, now India obviously enjoys a special position when it comes to foreign policy that the America adopts, especially at this stage where it says that India is of far too significant than it has been in the past for other issues, whatever it is, and both of them being victims of terror. So how is the administration taking, or rather giving all this importance to India and moving forward?
Well, I think it's obviously there are two major powers in Asia, and both of them rising, and that's India and China. And of course, together they constitute, what, 40% of humanity on Earth. It's quite obvious that we're going to have to develop, work together to develop both regional and multilateral fora that allocate suitable roles for all parties in how the international sphere is supposed to work. Many of the problems we face now are transnational. If you look at global warming, this is not a U.S. issue. It's not an Indian issue. It's not a Chinese issue. It's a human issue, and it's an issue that unless we address together now, we're going to leave to our children, and they're going to suffer the consequences, not us. I think it's this kind of recognition that we're trying to bring to the international sphere. In many ways, geography is still important, but in a lot more ways, geography is no longer significant. Problems are no longer local problems. They're no longer problems that are bound by political or even boundaries, natural boundaries such as mountain ranges or oceans. Problems are now indeed global. You need only look at the problem of terrorism, and I'm talking about all kinds of terrorism, not just what we see here, but what we see in South America, other countries, what we have in the United States. What India has. I mean, we've had our own domestic terrorists at work. You all obviously have had your own domestic terrorists at work. These are problems that we have to work together on, and I think these are problems that either we're going to acknowledge the fact that we have to develop closer relations and successfully use that in order to address these issues, or in fact we're going to suffer even more and more.
Right, before we leave, just one final word, if I may have from you, sir, in terms of the facilities being provided and in terms of facilitation that's going to be made more smoother in terms of visas being issued and in terms of encouraging more applicants to go to the US to travel or to even to study over there. So what's your word on that? A message for our viewers?
Well, in fact, we're far ahead of what we initially projected in terms of visa issuance. We've now issued over 45,000 visas in Hyderabad, and this is just in the span of since March. So we're well on track to basically do a lack of visas this year, despite the economic downturn, which very much approximates the number of visas that were issued in Chennai to residents of Andhra Pradesh prior to our opening. I think people are going to find that our services will improve. We're going to hire more staff. We anticipate now we're prepared for a workload of 500 applicants per day. I suspect that as the economy continues to work its way forward, that number will increase. We're going to hire and train people soon, and so that we're going to be ahead of the curve in addressing that increase. Hopefully, I think one of the constraints we have right now, believe it or not, is despite the fact that we've taken over this lovely palace, we're already to the point where we're straining for room inside of our building in order to meet all of our work requirements. At some point, we're going to build a new facility in Gachibowli, which will be purpose-built and designed to handle the ever-increasing workload that we project here.
So that's something our viewers would definitely want to hear with interest, because that's a building a lot of people have been eyeing on, and that's of archaeological interest, and they've been saying that the US Embassy would soon be moving out of it once they have their own facility built over there in Gachibowli, a purpose-built one.
I think if people look at the landscaping and the way we've taken care to preserve the exterior of the building, and in fact, I've actually, when we did the work on the building, I actually consulted with members of the family who used to live there to make sure that we got the right color, the right appearance, and in fact, I've received nothing but compliments from I guess the scions of the former Paigas for the job of restoration we've done. So hopefully, when we turn the building back over, everybody will be pleased with our custodial, the way we've handled our custodial responsibility.
That's great. So if anything that has happened to the building, it's only been good, actually, for the building. It's more of a facelift for that, right. Well, that's all we have time for now. Thank you very much for coming in, Ash. So we do appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
It was nice having you on the show. Well, that's all we have time for now. See you again in the next episode. Until then, bye.